Hi everybody, welcome to our live knitting event. My name is Brenda KB Anderson. I'm a crochet and knit designer and also instructor, and I'm very excited today to show you guys how to make this stocking. So when I was coming up with a Christmas theme party, because you know we're celebrating Christmas in July here, I really wanted to do something, kind of go back to the basics and also make something that had a really vintage feel, because I have a lot of really fond memories of being a kid on Christmas, and I just kind of was falling back on those memories and thinking about that when I was designing this project. So I wanted to use some colors and some nice bold stripes, and then of course the name on the stocking, personalized. My mom had made all of us kids stockings and we all had our names embroidered on the top of them. But one thing about embroidering on knitting or crocheting or otherwise bumpy fabrics with holes between your stitches, it can be really challenging to make it look really neat and tidy. So I have an alternative method here. We're not using embroidery to put the name on. We're going to be using a technique called needle felting. So we'll get to that towards the end. But this is such a great technique to use because it doesn't matter how many, it's not like it's color work or anything complicated like that where you have to plan it all out. You're basically like drawing with yarn or doodling with yarn and attaching it to your piece with this little barbed needle as you go. So it just really takes the stress out of personalizing it with a name at the top. It just makes it fun. You can put any name, any combination of letters, doesn't matter, as long as you can fit it there, you can make it work. If it's a really, really long name, you could switch down to like a thinner yarn so you can get a little more detail. But there are just, ways to customize it so you can really write anything on there. All right, well, I'm glad that you guys are here. If you guys have any questions about what I'm doing, or if you have any helpful tips or suggestions for other knitters or myself, I would love to hear them. Definitely put those in the chat. Also, if you have any suggestions for future events, for either stitches you'd like to learn or projects you are interested in making, to put those in the chat as well. I am excited to hear from you. Or if you just want to tell me where you're knitting from, or just anything about yourself, I always love to hear from you guys. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the materials you're going to need for this project. So for one stocking, it's in my opinion, it's fairly large, but I feel like as I've gotten older, I keep seeing the stockings get bigger and bigger, which just seem like they're going to be so hard to fill. Because I always thought of stocking stuffers as being little things, but this to me is a pretty standard size, maybe a little bit bigger than I had when I was a kid, size stocking. Let's see, I can tell you it's about 12 inches in circumference and about 19 inches from the top to the bottom, okay, not including the cuff that goes to the inside or the loop. So we're gonna need 3 skeins of yarn, and I do have the exact yarn that I used. I put a link in there in case you can't find it. It's fairly inexpensive, but really, really lovely wool. Here's the thing about this project is in order to do the personalization, the name at the top here, or whatever you're writing at the top, the yarn that you're using to create the word and the yarn that you're placing it on, so in this case it would be that off-white color, both of those yarns have to be able to felt. So typically we use a wool for that, but it could be alpaca or some other kind of animal fiber, but just make sure it's not a washable wool. If it says washable wool or superwash or anything like that, indicating that you can wash it in a washing machine, it's not going to felt because it's been treated to not felt, and we want it to felt. So that is essential for doing the name on here. Now, if you just have some yarn that you want to use, you don't want to use this technique, you could certainly embroider it on there or do some other type of way to get the name on there. But the way that I'm teaching this class and the needle felting technique, you will need to have both of those colors be a feltable yarn. This yarn is a chunky weight yarn. It's also a 1-ply, but it doesn't have to be a 1-ply. That's just the yarn that I picked out. I found that it was very easy to make that kind of yarn felt. I also mostly just picked it for the look of it, the appearance of it. I just liked how it looked. This is a surprisingly soft wool. It's got a lot of body to it, so it's not, I don't mean soft like drapey, doesn't have any structure. It does feel like it has a bounce and a structure that is nice for keeping the stocking in shape, but you could certainly substitute with something else. You can substitute with an acrylic or some other kind of a fiber blend, as long as you are not going to be doing the needle felting at the top. Otherwise, you gotta use wool or alpaca or something that's gonna felt. Okay, so we need 3 colors. The white color in the stocking, that's what I call the main color. And then we have color 1 and color 2, I think. Let me just double check and make sure that's how I labeled them. Let's see. Contrast color 1 is the green and contrast color 2 is the red. Okay, so this is contrast color 1, contrast color 2. And then I only needed 1 skein of each of these colors for my stocking. However, I only had a small ball of the main color left over when I was done. So I would suggest getting 2 balls just to make absolutely sure you're not going to run out. Or, since that does add to the cost of this project, if you want to, instead, for a little section on the inside, see we have like a little self-hem piece here. So it's nice and stiff at the top and it hides what happens on the back when we needle felt this, and it looks very neat and tidy in here. If you want to, for a section in here, you could create this with either the red or the green, because there's plenty of red or green left over after you make this project. So you can start with either red or green and work about maybe like 10 rounds into it and then switch to the white. And then you would for sure have enough of just, using those 3 skeins of yarn. I do have yarn amounts, the exact yarn you used, all that stuff is available. It's included in that download. All right. Oh, which by the way, there's a link for the download. It's free to everybody. And I highly recommend this download because, well, not only it has all of the instructions that you're going to need, but also I put a whole bunch of pictures in here of anything that's kind of tricky. Like we're gonna do a little bit of color changing, and it's actually not as tricky. It's not tricky, but it may be something you've never done before. So in order to have jogless stripes, I made a photo tutorial explaining how to do that. And I also did a photo tutorial on how to pick up your stitches around the heel. So we'll get into all of that in this live event, but if you need any more details, I am gonna be going through things a little bit quickly because there's a lot to cover. So definitely check out the download, there's more information in there. Okay, so you need the yarn. The needles I'm going to be using are, let me just double check here. Yeah, so they're a size 9, a US size 9, which is a 5.5 millimeter needle. Double point needles used throughout. It's just this one set of needles and you'll need 5 of them. I really like using bamboo or wood needles when I'm working on double points because especially if you're newer to knitting on double point needles, because they're a little bit more grippy than the metal needles or the plastic needles, and they won't just accidentally slide out as easily, which can be a very frustrating thing about double point needles. You can also use a different method if you like. You can use the magic loop method. You could use two circular needles, sorry, 2 circular needles of the same size if you prefer using that method as well. It's up to you, but I just like using the double point needles and you'll need 5 of those. And then other than that, you're gonna need the needle felting tool and something to needle felt into. So I'm using this brush, but I really like using those wool pads. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get into the needle felting. This is a needle felting tool. There's a sharp little barbed needle that's right here. It's tucked away inside the handle and we'll pull that out later. I did link to my favorite needle felting tool in the download if you want to check that out. That one I don't have with me today, but that one I just really, really like how that one works. So, okay, so let's get started here. You're gonna start by casting on 44 stitches. And you can use whatever cast-on method you like. I particularly like the German twisted cast-on, which is what I'm doing here, because it allows for a little bit of extra stretch. And this cast-on is actually going to be down here on the inside of the stocking. So I didn't want it to restrict the stocking at that point. I didn't want it to seem like it's tight across here. If it were up here, it wouldn't bother me as much, but it's gonna be down here on the inside. So that's why I chose this cast-on. If you need a little bit more help with that, we do have German twisted cast-on videos on the Knitting Circle website if you want to check that out. But I've got 4 more stitches to cast on. I've got the yarn ball yarn in this right here, and then in front I've got the yarn tail. And you're going to want to start with about 2 yards, make your slip knot, and then place that on your needle. And then to do the German twisted cast on, you can hold it in the slingshot position and tip your needle underneath this loop and over the top and grab that. And then we're gonna go over the top of this and pop through that little tiny triangle right there. And then we're gonna let that go with our thumb. So we're casting on 44 stitches. Right now I've got 41, 42, 43, and 44. And usually when I do this, if I can fit all of the stitches on one needle, I just cast it all into one needle and then I divide it after I'm done. And we're going to divide this so that we've got 11 stitches on each needle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then I'm going to take my next needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now I'm just going to double check and make sure I have 11 on this needle. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Okay, I do. So there's we wanted to have a little bit of extra yarn tail here in order to use that later to stitch the self hem in place. But you know, you can always add extra yarn in case you didn't leave enough. But that's why I have kind of an extra long yarn tail here to begin with. So there's lots of different ways to join and start working in the round, and we're going to do it in my opinion, in the simplest way. So we're going to place, especially because we don't need to be too worried about having a jogless join or anything like that. That happens because this is down inside of the stocking. So we're just going to do this the simplest way. So we've got 4 needles here, and you're just going to check and make sure this is not twisted. Okay, so like if this was twisted, you could see it would look like this. There would be like kind of a lump there. So you just got to make sure nothing is twisted. Just kind of lay it in a square shape. And I've got my yarn tail here, and then the yarn that's connected to the ball right here. So I'm going to bring that back behind this needle here. And then we're going to I'm going to grab my 5th needle, and then we're going to just start knitting. So I'm going to do 14 rounds of knitting before we do anything else. But don't worry, I'm not going to do all that here. I just wanted to show you how I kind of get this started. So because these are all just sort of dangling, if you've never worked on double point needles before, this is why I really like the bamboo needles versus the metal or the plastic just for double points, because they really seem to be a little bit more grippy and they'll stay in place. So once you knit all the stitches on that one needle, you've got a new free needle, and then you'll switch to knitting across the next needle. And whenever you're starting on the next needle, make that first stitch nice and tight. Really, I'm pulling on that pretty hard with my finger here so that we don't get those ladders or those gaps between where our stitches are on one needle from one needle to the next needle. And the first couple rounds is always the trickiest because it just feels like everything's dangling and it's a little bit awkward. But once you get a couple of rounds in, it does get quite a bit easier. So don't worry if this is the first time you've ever done it. You know, it does get easier. It will get easier for sure. So you just kind of take your time as you move to the next needle, just sort of readjust things. Make sure nothing's twisted or you're not getting caught on, or you didn't grab the opposite end to knit with. Okay, so we're just knitting all the way around and we're gonna knit 14 rounds. And you can place like a locking stitch marker at the beginning of your rounds if you like. I normally don't do that because I always have this little yarn tail here to remind me that this is the end of my yarn, or end of my round, or the beginning of the next round right there. So I know where, every time I pass that, I know that it's been another round. So you're just gonna keep knitting around until you've got 14 rounds, and your piece will look like this. Here we are. So we've got 14 rounds of knitting, and then we're gonna switch to purling just for one round. So we're gonna bring that yarn in front and then purl one round. And then we'll go back to knitting. So this purl round is just here to help your cuff know where it needs to fold. This purl round will become the very top edge of your stocking, and it's kind of like it just is creasing it in that one little line around, if that makes sense on that. It's gonna be making the top edge of your stocking. So I'm just purling all the way around. See how it makes that bump on the front, that purl bump, and that's going to allow it to fold to the inside. So we're gonna purl all the way around, and then we're gonna switch back to knitting, and we're gonna knit 15 rounds after our purl round. So there'll be 15 more rounds of knitting, and our piece will look like this, and you can see that little purl bump there. That's what's gonna allow it to fold right there. That's gonna be the top of our stocking. It just looks really neat and tidy. It just gives us, when we're doing the personalization, the needle felting, it'll give us a nice space to look at to know that our words are gonna be right there. Okay, so now we're gonna start working on the stripes. So after you've done your 15 rounds after the purl bump, okay, so we've got 15 rounds of knit, we're gonna switch to color number 1, which is the green. In my case, we've got lots of hellos here, you guys. Oh, thank you guys so much for popping in and saying hi. Good morning to Mary, and good afternoon from Austria. Sandy, hi. And there's a Brenda here. Hello from Kentucky. Hi, Brenda. And Deborah, hello from Idaho. And Dawn, I recognize you, Dawn. Hi, Dawn. Sandy says it really has a very vintage vibe. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that came across. Sometimes, when I design things, I feel like, am I the only person who thinks this about this project? I guess we'll find out. And before I used to do live events, I for many years, I designed for magazines and yarn companies and things like that, and I really wouldn't get that much of a response because I was never doing live events or interacting really with the people who were making my patterns, except on Ravelry. Sometimes I would get messages from people on Ravelry, which was always exciting. So it is nice to have these live events and actually be able to talk to you guys. Oh, and Brat's mom's here. Hi, Brat's mom. And thank you for the compliment, Claudia. We've got a love eye emoji from Josie. And I really like the circular needles for this better. Okay. Yeah, for a lot of people, they're gonna wanna use the circular needles. I really, for this particular project with this grippy yarn, the double point needles, for me, worked really well, but I definitely understand using the circular needles, 2 circular needles. Or the magic loop. Oh, we got a magic loop girl here, Erica. Okay, so let's talk about how to switch from one color to the next. Now, usually when I do jogless stripes, I usually just slip the first stitch and just knit all the way around and then keep knitting. And that method works okay. I did that method here at the very top of the stocking, and then later I was like, I think I want to try out a different method, and I switched it to down here to a different method, which is the method I'm going to be showing you. This method I feel like is nice and flat, and you don't get that issue where you have one fewer stitch, one fewer round or whatever of, like, you'll always have one fewer stitch there because you're slipping a stitch, if that makes sense. Which you can kind of see here, which that was the thing that was bugging me, was because I was doing such a thin little stripe of the white, and then I thought, okay, I'm gonna try a different jogless striping method, which I did down here, and I was so happy with it. And I'm excited to show it to you guys. This I feel like is maybe not as common, but I don't know, you guys can tell me, maybe you've already done this one before. So in order to switch to the next color, you finish up your previous round, and then you take the very last stitch that you knit, and you're gonna place it back, slip it back onto the left-hand needle just for a minute. Okay, so you're just gonna slip it purlwise. Then we're gonna take the color that we're going to start working in, which is this green, and I'm gonna make a little, sort of like a little loop here. I've got the cut end on the bottom and the long end that's attached to the ball of yarn on the top, okay? So then I'm gonna place that on my needle here, like this. Okay, so again, this is connected to the ball of yarn. That's sitting on top of my needle. The strand that comes underneath the needle to the back, that's just my cut end, all right? So we wanna leave a little bit of a yarn tail here so we can weave that in later. So we're just gonna leave that there, and then we're gonna slip this stitch back to the right-hand needle like that. And now we're gonna get ready to work with the green. So we're dropping the white color, we're gonna pick up the green color, and this feels wrong at first. The first time I did this, I thought, how can this be? It's just barely sitting here, hardly doing anything. I just didn't really trust it. But it actually works really, really well, you guys. Okay, so I'm kind of hanging on to this yarn tail in my hand. You probably for this project, because this yarn is so grippy, you don't need to worry about that too much. And then I'm gonna go in here and just go ahead and make a knit stitch with that new color, like this, and then just continue knitting. So I'm just knitting in that new color, and you can see what happened on the back. Here's where that loop is. It just kind of comes over here, and it looks kind of bad right now, but don't worry, we're gonna fix that later. That's just how you start it. So we're gonna go all the way around with this new color. Just knitting all the way around here. We've got a hello from Rosa from Fresno, and a hello from Massachusetts. Oh, we got another Magic Loop girl, Kathy. With the short circular needles, crazy trio from Addie work on the stocking. Oh, I don't know. I have used some very short circular, yeah, you can definitely get short circular needles. I think I have a 10-inch pair, and that would definitely work. But when you get a little closer to the, like when you start working on the heel and the toe, that might be difficult to use those shorter circular needles. So you're gonna have to switch over to double point or some other version of two circular needles or Magic Loop or something to finish that up. So part of the reason I recommended the double point needles was really just so that if people had to buy needles, they'd only have to buy one set and it would be easy. But yeah, there's, with knitting, there's always a different way to do things and people have different preferences, and definitely just do whatever feels like the right thing for you, the way that you like to knit. Okay, so I am almost all the way around, and I'm gonna show you that weird little spot where I laid the yarn down. So we've got a couple stitches away, and you can see that kind of funny loop happening there. So I'm gonna knit the last two last two white stitches or main color stitches. And then here we are at this place where there's a green and the main color, which is the white. Those are the very last two loops on there. And we're gonna knit them together. So I'm just gonna come over here, knit those together. And then I'm gonna pull on, it kind of got a little bit loose here, and this happens sometimes. I'm just gonna pull on that loop, that beginning tail, to tighten that down a little bit, and pull on the main color tail as well. Okay, and now we're ready to just continue knitting around. So I'm gonna knit one more round, and then I'm gonna show you what this looks like. So I know that there are other ways of making jogless stripes, but But I was happy to find this one because if you're doing narrower stripes, you know, not so many rounds in each stripe, it really seems to make it a little bit more seamless. So yeah, this was a new technique to me. I had never used it before, so I was very excited to try it out and have it actually be, I just feel like it looked better than the other technique that I was using, so. So in this stocking pattern, you're going to be all of the colored stripes. So like the green and the red stripes, those are all 5 rounds. So you'll work 5 rounds and then you'll switch to the white and then you'll work 2 rounds in the white and then you switch to the red and work 5 rounds in the red, switch to the white. So every time, you know, there's always a thin white stripe between each of the colors, and the red and the green are always 5 rounds. All right, I'm coming around to the end here. That is the end of my round. So I want to just show you what that looks like. Let me tuck this under here. So because we pulled on this little yarn, or this beginning yarn tail, that kind of straightens out that jog and it makes it look like it continues from one side to the other. When in actuality, you know, it's always shifted when you start a new round. When you start, here's the green and then it ends up like on top by the time you come around. So that's why it always has that sort of jog in color. But because we have this little yarn tail tucked underneath this strand, we are able to pull on that and it basically forces it to align across that, you know, the beginning of the round so that it looks like it's an even stripe. So let me just show you this again. So this direction, this is what it looks like right here. That's where our jog is. I mean, you can see it a little bit, but it's much less visible. You know, we've got 2 stitches in the white here. It's much less visible to me to look at this as compared to this, where we just have like that 1 stitch in the white because I slipped my stitch at the beginning of the round. That was a different technique. So this is the technique that I'm using here. All right, so, but if you have a different technique that you prefer, you know, definitely do that. There's always room to switch things up and customize it and do it your own way, right, in knitting? Okay, let me see here. Oh, we've got a hi from Munich, Germany. Hello, welcome. Okay, so after you do your 5 rounds, then you're gonna change to the white and change in the same way and work 2 rounds in that and then go back to the red and you're gonna be striping back and forth. Let me show you what that looks like here. Okay. So this is a stocking in progress. Just ignore the top here. We have not gotten to this yet. Let me just fold that underneath so you guys, we'll just pretend that's not there. So as we're working up the stocking, we're gonna go green, white, red, white, green, white, red, white, green, white, red. Okay, so there's 3 repeats of the red, 3 of the green, and then we're going to place a little bit of waste yarn here. We're gonna knit some waste yarn here, and then later on we're going to remove the waste yarn, pick up those stitches, and then knit the heel later on. So I'm gonna show you how to place that waste yarn to do this heel. And here is, so this little sample, actually let me pull this back over here so I can kind of orient you on what this is. This is what you should have, you know, right before you start the heel. You should end with that red stripe there. So that is what I'm showing you here. We're just pretending this little loop is this section of our stocking, okay? And now we're ready to get ready for that heel. So I'm going to show you the color change one more time. Because we're changing to white, we're just doing 1 round in the main color. Alrighty. Oh, and I did want to talk a little bit about carrying your yarn. So with stripes, you can decide for this project if you want to carry your yarn up. And let me show you, let me see. I think I left some of it unstitched so you guys can see what this looks like. Here we go. So what I decided to do was I carried my white yarn up, but I did not carry the colors. And the reason that I did that was because the white yarn, there isn't as much space between one white stripe and the next as opposed to one red stripe and the next. That's kind of a larger amount of space. So I didn't carry my yarn for the colors like the red and the green, but I did carry the white yarn. Now you can decide if you don't want to do that, you can just, cut it off after every round, and join new. But what I did was I carried the white yarn all the way up, and then I used these extra little yarn tails of the color, and as I wove these in, I kind of stitched over that carried yarn to secure it so there isn't a big loop so nobody can get their fingers stuck in there when they're reaching into their stocking on Christmas morning. So you can see here that I just sort of stitched over that. So that's something to think about. It made it really easy for me. I didn't have so many ends to weave in because I was just carrying that white yarn. And I'll show you here what I mean by that if you've never done that before. So I've already done a stripe in the white here, and I still have my yarn ball attached. I'll show you. Okay, so I just dropped it. When I switched colors, I just dropped it and let it hang on the inside or on the back side of my work. And then I picked up the red and started knitting with that, and now I'm gonna switch back to the white. So to do the color change, if your yarn ball is connected, it's the same thing. So you'll just slide your last loop that you worked in the last color of the last round, last color, and now we're switching to the new color. And then we're gonna grab that main color that we were carrying, and we're just gonna bring that up and bring it to the front of our needle and up over the top of the needle. Okay, so this is the yarn ball connecting. It's going up over the top like that. Then we're going to switch, then we're gonna slide that stitch right back to the right hand needle like that. And this is just hanging out here. So now we can grab that and we're gonna start knitting with that. So we're gonna give that a little bit of a tug there. So we're starting out and we don't want there to be a gap. But you can see there's my little yarn over that I did. That was the last stitch and we slipped it back, and then we just started knitting with that main color. So we're gonna do a round in the main color before we place the waste yarn for the heel. Oh, thanks, Sheila. I was just reading your comment. They haven't knitted in years, but they're looking forward to getting back into it. That's awesome. Oh, you've been quilting for a while. Oh, so my mom is a really big quilter, and I think she's always had this secret hope that I would turn into a quilter too. And she taught me how to sew way back when I was like 4 years old, and I've been most of my career since my early 20s, I worked in a costume shop, so sewing was like a very, very big part of my life. I've always made garments and costumes and that sort of thing. So it's just like one shade away from quilting. And in my next live event, which is later on today, I'm going to be doing a live event where I'm teaching people how to make a pillow that's actually crocheted, but it looks like it's quilted. It's got like those okay, so I'm not a quilter, so you guys who are quilters are probably gonna laugh at me, but I think it's when you have a square, but it's divided on the diagonal, and one side is a triangle, or like one color of the triangle. The two triangles that make up the square, we've got one color on one side and one on the other side. So I'm gonna teach people how to make those and how to put it together to look like, I believe the quilt pattern is called a crystal star quilt pattern. So that's gonna be my next live event that's happening later on today at 11:30. Just in case anybody wants to watch that. But I showed that project to my mom, and who's very excited about quilting, and I think she just kind of had a little moment of, oh, okay, maybe she is going to turn into a quilter after all. I feel like I'm just baby steps away. I don't know why I'm resisting. Mostly, I think I'm just afraid of the fabric stash that would probably happen. Okay, so I came all the way around, and now I'm at that weird little spot where I've got the yarn over of this new color that I've been knitting with here and the old color together. So now I'm gonna knit them together and just drop them off the needle. And I'm gonna pull on that red yarn tail to tighten that just a little bit. And there we go. So that will create our jogless stripe. And now we're ready to begin working up our waste yarn here. So let me grab that. So this is just a worsted weight acrylic yarn that I'm using here for the waste yarn. Oh, I forgot to mention we needed this when I talked about materials. So this is just, you could just grab whatever from your stash. Just find something that's not super sticky because we're going to be removing it later. And it should be something the similar-ish weight, but it really doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going to be placing this on my project so that it's just hanging out here on the front. So I'm putting it between my two needles, and I'm just going to knit across the first two needles, meaning half of the circumference, or 22 stitches. Just going to knit with this new little strand of waste yarn. So this is basically just kind of setting aside some loops that we're going to pick up later when we create the heel. So you'll knit all the stitches on the first needle, so that's 11 stitches, and you'll knit all the stitches on the second needle, which is 11 stitches. And if you are using a circular needle at this point, or some other way that's not double point needles, you'll have to slide all those needles back, or all those stitches back over, so that you're beginning, so that you can begin, your two needle tips are over here again, because we're going to go back to where we first started knitting all of that waste yarn. Oh, I'm just going to cut this off. Just need about 6 to 10 inches or so, and we're just going to let that hang out on the front of our project, both strands. And now we're going to grab that main color once again, and we're going to knit all of the stitches in the round. So I'm going to be hanging on to this waste yarn that's sitting on the front because it's not really attached to anything, and it'll just sort of loosen up and pull out. And we're going to just go ahead and knit across all of these waste yarn stitches. Just like that. And knitting across the second needle of waste yarn. So if for some reason you wanted your stocking to face the other way, so what I mean by that is, like, say you already have some other stockings and you want them all to be lined up so the toes are pointing the same way. This is really the front of your stocking. The joins are the beginning of the rounds are happening back here on the back of the stocking. But if you wanted the toe of the stocking to be this way and the heel to be this way and this to be the front, if you care about that, then you can place this waste yarn on the third and fourth needles instead of the first and second. So this only pertains to you if you don't like the way that the stocking is oriented. It just occurred to me that some people might like have a specific way they want their stocking to hang. Like everybody else has their stocking hanging to the left. Maybe you should too. Okay, so we're continuing with that main color yarn, and I'm just going to be working across the third and fourth needles to the end of the round. Okay, so we worked across the two waste yarn needles, and now we are working the last two needles in the round. Just knitting everything. And here we are at the end of the round. So at this point, you would switch to the next color, which would be green, and then you would continue knitting knitting your stripes. You'll go right back into the same pattern we've been working. So 5 rounds of green, 2 rounds of white, 5 rounds of red, 2 rounds of white, and then you're going to end with 5 rounds of green, and then I believe it's 1 or 2 rounds of the white. I can't remember. Before we start the decreases, let me check. Through 79, yep, so 2 rounds of white. So you're gonna end with 2 rounds of the main color, and then you're gonna start your decreases to shape the toe. So I already have those in progress here, but I'm gonna show you how to do them. So after you've worked those 2 rounds in the white, then you're gonna start doing your decreases. Oh, here, let me just show you what this looks like, by the way. So here's our little waste yarn section that we put in there, and then we continued working up the rest of the toe right here. And now we're gonna be doing our decreases. So I've already started those decreases, but this is how they work. You're going to start out with a knit 2 together. So you're just going to place your needle knitwise through these 2 stitches, and you're gonna knit them just like they were 1 stitch. So we have a knit 2 together right at the beginning, and make sure that's pulled nice and tight. And then you're gonna knit all the way across the rest of that needle. And then we've gotten to the needle number 2. So we're gonna knit until there are only 2 stitches left. And here's my 2 stitches. Then we're gonna slip, slip, knit. So we slip it as if we're gonna knit it. So we come in to the left side of the stitch and pull it off the needle. Same thing with the next loop. And then we're gonna knit that through the back. So slip, slip, knit. All right, and now we're gonna do exactly the same thing on this side of the sock. So we're gonna start out by knitting 2 together. Make sure you make that nice and tight. Anytime you switch to a new needle, make sure you really tighten that up. All right, here's the next needle, and we're gonna knit all the way across until 2 stitches are left. There's those 2, and we're gonna slip that knitwise, slip the next stitch knitwise, and then we're going to knit through the back loop. So that's a slip, slip, knit, like that. All right, and so after you do your first decrease round, then you work one round even, meaning you're just knitting all the way around. Then you do another decrease round, you knit all the way around. So you're kind of going every other round, you're doing decreases. And then at about halfway along the toe, you're just gonna start decreasing every single round until you have, let's see, 8 stitches left. Okay, so when you only have 8 stitches left, so that would be 2 stitches on each needle, total of 8, then you're just going to cut your yarn tail, use a yarn needle, and run it through all of those open stitches and pull that tight to close the toe. And then you can run that through a couple more times just to make it really sturdy and kind of fill out those loops a little bit. And your piece will look like this once you've finished it up. Now this is not a normal way to finish off a toe of a sock, but I was just avoiding the Kitchener stitch. I was trying to keep this a little bit more beginner friendly, and there are lots of other techniques that we're talking about in this particular project. And also, this is not going to be worn by a foot, also, P.S. I mean, most likely nobody's wearing this, although I like to do that when I was a kid, put my foot in my Christmas sock. So it could, I just wanted to kind of finish it up with that little easy little ending, weave in my ends. Then you got to go back and work on the heel. So let me show you how to do that. So in order to start working on this heel, first we're going to place our needles into our stitches before we cut the yarn out. So if you're looking at, so I have this with the toe pointing in this direction. This is the cuff direction pointing towards me. So I'm going to place my needle underneath the right leg of each of these loops in the main color that you can see here. So I'm going to pick up 11 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then I'm going to use my next needle, pick up 11 here. So still picking up that right leg. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay, we got the next needle in. Now I'm going to rotate this so the toe is pointing at myself. I mean, you should have finished off your toe so you won't have all these needles facing you. All right, and then we're going to pick up, let's see, that one. We've got 11 stitches here, so we're going to pick up 1, 2, oops, I split my yarn a little. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And then we'll pick up 11 here. Picking up that right leg of the loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay, so you should have 11 on each needle here. And then we're going to go ahead and cut the waste yarn. So just be careful when you do this, you're not cutting a loop of the main color. You can also just, if you're worried about that, you can also just sort of pick it out. You can cut it off really short here, and you can just use another needle to just sort of unravel it here like this, if you're worried about cutting it. I usually end up cutting it in a couple of places because it seems like so much to pick out. But you have to be so careful when you do that, that you're really only cutting just that waste yarn. We're going to pull that out. And don't worry, it's going to look like a big gap when you do that on the sides, but don't worry. Don't worry. All right, getting close here. All right, thank you guys for being patient. That took me a little bit longer than I thought. It was a little bit tangled in there. Okay, so now we have this opening in the back of our sock, and that's where we're gonna put our heel. And The good news is you guys already pretty much know how to knit the heel because it's very similar to the toe where we just do decreases, only we're not going to do any rounds where we're working even except for the very first round where we're just joining our yarn and knitting around, and I'll show you that. Let me grab a new ball of yarn here. Okay. Okay, so to knit across our heel, we're going to be starting, so the toe is pointing away from me, right? We're going to be starting by knitting across the very bottom edge, this bottom opening here. There we go. And when we do this, we are going to be picking up a couple extra loops just so that we don't have a gap here at the corner of the heel. Okay, so before I knit across, I'm going to use this bottom needle to pick up, let me see if I can pull this out of the way. There are really good pictures of this in your download in case you are having trouble understanding what exactly I'm pointing to here. But this stitch and this stitch in the main color white, right there and right there, we're going to pick up the right legs of each of those stitches. So one here and one here. And then we're going to go ahead and just join our yarn by knitting. So I'm going to just leave that yarn tail on the outside, hanging on the outside, and then I'm going to go ahead and just start knitting across. So we're going to knit across those two little stitches we picked up. We're going to knit across all the rest of those stitches where we had freed them from the waste yarn. So we've got a total of 13 stitches now on this first needle because we picked up those two stitches of the main color in that stripe. All right, so we've got our 13 stitches here. And we're going to move to the next needle. And we're going to work across these 11 stitches, and then we're going to pick up 2 more at the end. Okay, so we've knit across the 11. Now we're going to pick up 2 stitches right here in this main colored stripe. Okay, we're going to pick up the right leg here and the right leg there. And we're just going to go ahead and knit those. All right, and now we're going to rotate our work 180 degrees like this. And then we're going to knit across these 2 needles that are across the bottom of the foot. So we're going to do exactly the same thing that we just did, except we're going to pick up those 2 main color stitches right from that stripe. Okay, just the right leg of each. And then we're going to knit across. So right now we've got 13 stitches on our needle because we picked up 2 in that little main color stripe. So we're going to knit across those 11. Just like that. And here we are with the last 11 stitches, the last of the 4 needles right here. And we're going to knit across all 11 stitches, and then we're going to pick up 2 at the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then we're going to pick up 2 stitches in this main color stripe right here. All right, pick up 1 there and 1 there. I almost knit with the beginning yarn tail, you guys. caught myself just in the nick of time. Okay, so here's our last 2 stitches that we just picked up. And so now we've got 13 stitches on each needle, and we are well on our way to just working in the round, decreasing. So we would start decreasing our heel. We would do a knit 2 together here, knit across that needle, knit across this needle until there's 2 stitches left, slip, slip, knit. Then we're gonna turn, repeat. Knit 2 together, knit across, knit all the way across till there's 2 stitches left, slip, slip, knit. So it's exactly the same stitch pattern that I just showed you where we were decreasing the toe, only there's no rounds where we're just, besides the one we just did where we picked up those stitches, every round is a decreased round. So we're decreasing 4 stitches per round until we get, I think it's still 8 stitches left at the heel. Let's see. Yep, 8 stitches. So we're going to do the same thing. You'll cut your yarn, run it through the remaining 8 stitches, and close up that heel. So that part is finished, and now I want to show you how we personalize the stocking. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. It's a little awkward with all these needles down here, but I do want to finish this sock later, so I'm just going to leave them in there. And here is the top of our sock. And so you'll see we've got that join. This is the beginning of the rounds. It should be right centered in the back of our sock. I mean, once you get the heel in here and the toe in here, you're gonna know what side, you know, what's the front, what's the back of your stocking. So in order to do the needle felted section, you can place your mat or your bristle brush thing, like what I have here, inside of your sock. And if you're not very comfortable with, I'm gonna place it this way a little bit, I think. I just wanna make sure, you wanna make sure you're not stretching out your fabric. So my fabric is a tiny bit stretched, so what I'm gonna do is stretch it across the back so that the front, where it's going across the brush, is not stretched at all. Okay, so it's a little stretched back here. You can see it's tighter here. That doesn't really matter for right now. You just want to make sure this is not stretched out when you put your brush in there, or your felting pad, or whatever it is that you have. All right, I'm going to grab my felting tool and get that ready. So this is a really inexpensive felting tool. It has like a little barbed needle. And the needle has like a little L-shaped bend, so when you place it in here, it stays in place. And it just works like that. And then you use this little barbed needle to entangle your wool pieces together, to felt them together. All right, we're gonna do, I'll do this stocking for my friend Joe. So if you would like, ahead of time, you can use like a wash away marker, those blue, or like one of those fading markers that you can use. They're in the sewing section at your craft store. And you can trace it out. You can write right on here if you want, and then you can rinse it out later to get rid of the marks. Or what I usually do is I just start by needle felting just a little bit at first. And not getting too crazy into it until I am sure that that's where I want my letters to be. So, and you may want to give yourself, like, you know, if you have a pin or something, you may want to put that in the middle so it kind of helps you stay oriented with where the middle of your word is going to be. There are things that you can do to kind of help yourself get your, you know, it's like if you were writing something on a piece of paper. You know, you can divide it in half and make sure the center of your word is right there. Usually what I do is I just start felting. So you just have to make sure, especially with this brush thing that I'm felting into, that brush that's underneath here, you have to go straight up and down. If you are using a wool felt pad, it's just kind of like a thick felted brick of wool. Those are my favorite because if you go in at an angle, it's not gonna break your needle. These needles do break, so, you know, just sort of be mindful of that when you're working on it. You may want to even wear goggles if you're worried about that. You don't want anything to, you know, if you're getting very excited about your needle felting, it could fly up. You don't want it to hit you in the face. All right, so I am doing this in a cursive letters. You don't have to do it this way. You could cut little pieces and felt them into your project. You could certainly do that if you wanted to. So I'm not felting very much. I'm just felting it very lightly right now because I'm just sort of testing out where I want these letters to be. I can still pull this off, like it's sticking, but I can still remove it if I want. All right, and then we'll have an O here. And I want to change directions. So the reason that I'm doing this in cursive, besides that I feel like it looks a little more vintage, you know, because who uses cursive now? Not very many people, but I love it. But also because it makes it a lot easier, so you can just keep using, you know, your yarn, and you don't have to cut all these little pieces. But if you don't want to do it in cursive, that is completely fine. You can just cut little chunks and needle felt them on. There we go. Joe. Okay, so once you are happy with where your letters are, how they look, you can also cut your piece. And I cut that a little extra long because I wanted to show you something. If you are placing just straight lines and you're cutting pieces, it really helps it look nice if you are able to fold it under itself like this. And be careful, you don't want to needle felt through your finger. So, you know, never needle felt right next to your finger. But see how the end doesn't, where it's folded, it doesn't look all fuzzy because you kind of fold it underneath and all the fuzzy bits are underneath. You know, you can also just felt and felt and felt and felt until it stops looking all wispy like that. And I know there's probably a lot of people watching this and they're like, Brenda, is that really gonna stay on? I mean, it doesn't really look like it's gonna stay on, Brenda, but it will. You just have to felt it a lot more. So the other felting pen that I linked to has 3 little felting barbs, 3 little needles, and you can felt a lot faster. I'm also a little bit afraid to felt too fast into this brush because I haven't used the brush in a long time and I'm very used to using my wool pads, but I had lent it to a friend, so I don't have it. So I'm being a little extra cautious because I don't want to break my needle. But this, you know, it does take some time to really get it felted in there. So this one's already been felted and you can see it is really stuck. You know, you can hear the texture of it, but it's not coming free. It's really, really felted in there. And so you're just gonna keep felting and felting and felting until it stops looking quite so fuzzy. Like, see, if you compare these two, I don't know if you guys can tell, but it gets a little more crisp looking as you felt it. It's going to kind of condense all these little fibers a little bit more the more you felt them. Right now it feels very fuzzy and I could probably pull off most of this at this point. There might be a little bit of red fuzz on my piece if I did that though. But you know, I could probably pick this off. This one I can't pick off. It is really felted in there and it will stay like that. Anybody who's ever accidentally felted a sweater and tried to unfelt it, it's really hard to unfelt something. You really can't. All right, oh, let me just check and see. Oh, I'm missing lots of your comments, you guys, I'm sorry. Oh, half square triangle, that's what I was trying to think of when I was talking about the quilting terms. Yes, thank you for that, Karina, 625. Fabric stash is exactly why I don't take up quilting. Yeah, I'm a little afraid of that. Okay, I thought you'd be able to pull the waste yarn through. Okay, so sometimes you can pull your waste yarn through, but this yarn that I'm using is very sticky. So if you use a cotton, a much smoother yarn, you might be able to pull it through, but usually have to cut it in a few places. The yarn that I ended up using today for the waist yarn probably wasn't like the best choice. It worked just fine, but I would try for like a cotton, something that is not fuzzy at all, and you might be able to pull it mostly through, or at least cut it in a couple places and then pull it out easier. Okay. Oh, we have a question. Is this 100% worsted weight wool for the lettering? So this is a chunky weight yarn. It's the same. The red is the same as the yarn that I've been using throughout the project. It's exactly the same yarn. And it's a chunky weight, 100% wool, and it definitely has to be a feltable wool. So yes, it is 100% wool. And yeah, otherwise this process is not gonna work. But you could embroider it or do some other sort of applique or something else to, you could cut out little felt letters and stitch them on, There's lots of other ways you can personalize it if you don't want to use wool. All right, so I'm not going to finish felting this because we're just about out of time here, you guys. But I wanted to show you what the inside of this is starting to look like. You can see how there's red on the inside here. That's the fibers kind of getting poked through and they're getting tangled. And the more you felt that, the more red is going to come through, and it's just going to become like kind of a hard line on the outside. After you're done with that and you know that you're finished with your felting, then you can fold this on into the inside here, and you can use your beginning yarn tail here to just do a little whip stitch between this edge, and then you can pick up these extra little stitches in the white. Okay, so you just do a whip stitch into all of those to seam it down to the inside, and this will hide that kind of red fuzzy stuff that happens from the needle felting, but also it just makes a really nice, it just looks really finished to have that nice thicker edge up here. And then when you stuff it full of all those amazing Christmas things, it's not going to get all stretched out or look kind of limp. It's just going to look nice and crisp, and you can still read the name. So the last thing, which I won't be able to show you guys because we're out of time, but the last thing is this is just an I-cord here, and you just cast on 3 stitches, make I-cord for about 9.5 inches, and then cut your yarn, run it through the last 3 stitches and pull it tight, and then you just sew it right here to the inside of the top of the cuff so that it's kind of sitting on the side that's along where the heel is. And if you've never done I-cord before, we do have videos on the Knitting Circle website that teach you how to make I-cord. It's very simple technique to know how to do, and it makes a really nice kind of rope-like structure there. So that's perfect for a hanging loop. All right, thank you guys so much for being here and for like all your comments and just helpful tips and everything that you guys have been throwing into the chat. I really appreciate that. It's always fun to teach these live events and get a chance to talk to you guys. So thank you guys so much. If anybody is interested, I do have for Craftsy Premium members, or also if you are a member of the Creative Crochet Corner, if you are a gold member of that, then you'd have access to the live tutorial I'm going to be teaching on the pillow that I mentioned earlier. So that's going to be happening in 20 minutes, you guys. So hopefully I'll see some of you guys there. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Bye, everyone.